Welcome to Vaguely Scientific. If you've made it this far, there may be no hope for you. But thanks for tuning in. I may be Derek, but my heart's in the right place. And Jim is here as always. Don't go breaking my heart, Jim.
I got your left ventricle in my sights.
And our guest this week is wearing his heart on his sleeve. Welcome back, Joe.
Hey, how's it going?
I can see your left ventricle too, because your heart's outside of your body, which is probably bad for you.
It's like actually attached to your sleeve.
It hurts at times.
Probably put that back in your chest at some point.
Nah.
Yeah, well, this is a show where listeners send in questions to hear our vaguely scientific answers, but before we answer those questions, we always make time for the fun science fact of the day. Jim?
Okay. Much of the limestone that was used in a lot of the iconic buildings in America, like the Empire State Building and the Pentagon, were quarried in Indiana. Limestone has since fallen out of favor as a construction material, but a lot of these old quarries are still there. They're filled with water, but swimming in a quarry can be very, very dangerous, and a lot of them are on private property, so it's probably best to avoid them. But I just think it's really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. Huh. I don't know if this is still popular, but there was a trend when I was a kid of people going to quarries to swim, and they weren't allowed to.
Mm-hmm. I'm not familiar necessarily with the swimming. The thing I'm familiar with is like riding like dirt bikes and four-wheelers and that sort of stuff. And if they catch you, they'll run you off.
Yeah.
That is private property and also dangerous, which is, I think, the primary reason they want you to leave.
Yeah, a lot of those quarries you cannot see the bottom of at all. They can be fairly shallow or extremely deep, and you really don't know until you sink into one.
That's what it was. Yeah, I had heard stories of people like diving into them, and they were shallower than you want when you're diving.
A lot of broken arms at best.
Yeah. Let's keep it at the broken arms, I suppose.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we should probably dive into the main event of our episode. Half of it anyway, with question 1. Question 1 this week. Why does everything taste like chicken?
The Matrix.
I knew it!
The answer is obviously robots.
Robots.
Yeah, the Matrix. Yeah.
Cool. Question.
Question done. I made a specific note not to mention the thing in the Matrix because I was like, I bet one of you is going to.
Or both. I have a controversial opinion. Maybe it's controversial. I don't know. Anytime someone gives me something and says it tastes like chicken, it does not.
I don't think that is a controversial opinion, Jim.
Because everyone's like, oh, if you don't like seafood, you should try eel. It tastes just like chicken. And hey, guess what? It tastes like a fish. And chicken does not taste like fish.
I mean, it tastes like eel.
Yeah. Eels are fish, so.
Yeah, well, so is salmon, and salmon tastes like...
absolutely one of those things that does not taste like chicken at all. Even eel, which I love eel, it does not taste like chicken.
Yeah.
Well, you almost say that, like, not tasting like chicken is a bad thing. Like, I like things other than chicken.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I would go so far as to say, like, I've really only eaten 2 birds that I can recall. I've only eaten turkey and chicken.
Okay.
I've never had duck as far as I can remember. But I will say, of the 2 birds, I think chicken is the least interesting flavor.
Well, that's interesting. So the first thing I found with this is the cliche, it tastes like chicken. The origin of that expression is apparently undetermined. But more often than not, And I think this is something we all kind of know, but just don't really think about. But more often than not, it is used tongue-in-cheek to describe something that is completely foreign to us as kind of a joke. It tastes just like chicken. And I was reading about why chicken specifically. And because of a whole lot of anatomical things, which maybe we can go into later, chicken is on its own not a very flavorful meat.
Huh. Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yep.
I mean, not to bogart the conversation here, but I just thought this was really interesting.
Well, no, I mean, you're right. Because like generally speaking, when anyone that I know cooks chicken, we season it, we add various sauces or spices, and you don't just eat like a plain chicken.
It's very easy to kind of like blend with other flavors.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it's kind of a milder flavor.
Yeah. Although I will say chicken skin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, chicken skin is pretty good. If you get like a rotisserie chicken and it's got the skin and the meat, and you just got to eat them together because the skin is its own seasoning.
But that's because that's where the fat is.
Right? That's where I was going.
Is flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times what you're going to find, and now here comes, most people on here who have been listening know me as the biologist, but here comes one of my other passions. Cooking and food. And
I like food.
Oh, I love food. And the reason that we say fat is flavor is because that is actually where you're going to find a lot of stored minerals and nutrients, whereas the muscle itself, which is what the flesh of like the breast is, it's all just muscle. It's going to be it's great for you. It's high in protein, and that's about it. But then that's why a lot of cooks, myself included, prefer working with the dark meats of like the thighs and the legs, because those tend to have actual fat inside of the flesh, and so you end up with a lot times a lot more succulent and a lot more flavorful meat, because there is this fat that can render out of the meat into the muscle fibers and then into whatever sauce you might be cooking.
I was reading that because of everyone knows the expression tastes like chicken, there were some people that speculated, this seems less likely, but I'll explain why. But there were some people that speculated that dinosaurs being descended from, or the opposite of descended from, birds.
Ancestors.
The ancestors of birds, there was speculation that maybe dinosaurs did taste like chicken, but where that gets interesting is if you look at other birds. So the breast meat of a chicken is what they call fast fibers, which are good for very fast moving the wings. There's a lot of power in them, and they get worked a lot. But if you look at other birds, the meat of other fowl often tastes nothing like chicken. For example, pheasant meat is described as just a completely different thing.
Yep. Ostrich
meat is considered very similar to beef.
Yep.
Duck is often considered a red meat. Now, I've had duck of those, and duck's very greasy.
Yes.
I've heard that, yeah.
It's very greasy, which again, you've got that fat. But the other thing that it has going for it is a lot of time duck meat has a lot of, this is going to get a little gruesome, I apologize, it has a lot of blood to it, actually.
Yeah.
And that's part of why it is considered kind of a red meat, even though that's not really what defines red meat, but neither here nor there. But yeah, so you end up getting a lot of those mineral flavors with duck. If you've never had it, for the record, give it a try. It is so unique and delicious, but it's also a little pricey.
And the reason that red meat is is because it's very rich in iron and myoglobin.
Yep.
Which is why the more blood in the duck meat would make it closer to red meat.
Exactly. And what I also think is interesting is like even within chicken itself, you can get vastly different flavors. For example, have either of you heard of a Cornish hen?
Yeah.
So a Cornish hen is simply a chicken that is chosen to be slaughtered at a much younger age than a fully developed what we call chicken. And so what you end up having, and they've actually blindly given Cornish hens to people and said, how does this taste compared to chicken? And most people say it is vastly different in flavor, even though it's literally just a chicken.
It's chicken meat, same meat.
There hasn't been, I would say, a ton of research into this, but there's some belief that because of the age of it, it has yet to develop a lot of that, as you said, the fast fiber. So it's actually, even the breast meat is going to be very similar to that thigh and leg meat and still be very kind of fatty and more flavorful, leading to its kind of more unique flavoring.
I want to say this is anecdotal, and people have disagreed with me on this before. So if this is not your experience, I believe you. But I had frog legs one time in my life, and the frog legs that I had, which people have told me I may have had poorly prepared frog legs, which I believe. I absolutely believe that. But when I ate these frog legs, they didn't have a lot of seasoning on them.
Oh, okay.
And I legitimately did think they tasted like chicken. But the weird thing about it was the texture was like fish.
Yes.
So it was so weird to me.
So that is actually a very common thing, at least from what I've been looking up and just from anecdotal knowledge as well, that you're actually going to find that a lot of amphibians and lizards supposedly have chicken-like flavor.
Oh,
interesting.
There's a lot of evidence for people who have had, for example, turtle. So like if you have turtle soup, apparently, now I have not tried it, but a lot of people that I've spoken to who have said, oh, it's just chicken. Like, obviously it's turtle, but it tastes like chicken. And I personally have had snake and alligator, and they both taste of chicken.
Those are on my list here of things that people have reported actually do to alligator, crocodile, frog, and snake.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I'll tell you this is that I don't think snake tastes like chicken.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I've yet to try snake. Wow.
I don't think I'd do it again.
I agree.
I haven't done it, so I would do it.
Yeah, at least the one I had, it tasted okay, let me rephrase. It tastes of chicken to me, but it's a bit gamier.
Gamey is a really good way of describing it. I thought it was a bit more like bitter than chicken. I don't know if bitter is the right word for it, but like
interesting.
I feel like that's the best word I can come up with right now.
Yeah. And for anyone who's not really experienced kind of game meats, it's very hard to explain what we mean other than saying it has a bit of that barnyard funk.
I very recently discovered that because somebody gave me some venison that they didn't want to eat, because I know a lot of people who don't like to eat venison, but they do like to hunt, and I'm like, don't do that. I don't know, but so because I didn't want the meat to go to waste, my brother and I tried cooking it, and this is going to be a hot take, and I'm calling everyone out. I think if you like steak, there's no reason you shouldn't like venison.
Agreed.
So get over it. But from that, I kind of figured out what the gaminess was, and I'm a person who likes liver. I like the offal part of the meat.
That mineralness.
Yeah, so like I like that taste.
Yeah,
so
I like venison. Actually, the thing that I had the most, I haven't had it in a very long time, but an old high school teacher of mine, actually of all of ours, but you may not have known he did this.
Is it?
Insert teacher name.
It was.
We were talking about hunting. That's the only thing I know about him.
He actually he always hunts deer, and when he does, he takes a lot of that meat and he makes it into jerky.
I've had that.
And he actually brought that in for our class one time to try. And I loved it. And then since then I have also tried like venison steaks, and it's excellent.
I'm a fan. I mean, it's possible that it's because I got a bunch of it for free this year, but like I am a fan.
That's fair. I have another friend who hunts, and this is completely off topic, but that's okay. And he also eats like he has gotten ostrich before.
Okay.
Now, he did not hunt the ostrich, for the record.
Oh, okay.
He simply had the opportunity to try it.
He went out with a shotgun and just went to town on the ostrich.
He just offed the ostrich. He has another one as well that he was like, if you ever get the opportunity, never turn it down. I won't lie. I may have just messaged him asking.
I made it a goal in my life that to at least try every food I'm able to try.
Antelope.
Oh, okay.
And apparently, antelope is basically like venison, but a little bit gamier.
Okay.
And to me, that just sounds phenomenal.
I like whatever people are describing as gamey. I've determined I think that's something I like.
I would think that the things that are going to be closest to chicken are going to be other birds, but I feel like all the ones we've talked about so far, that is not the case. So
that's what I was reading, is that like it surprises people, but like other birds don't taste like chicken.
And I think that actually comes down to the fact that chicken has ended up in a very unique placement as far as evolution is concerned. Other birds have their muscles for very different things than what chickens have them for.
That's true.
And so chickens, especially because we have messed with chickens' evolution.
Yeah.
We have selectively bred them to have, larger breast muscles specifically for meat.
For meat, yeah. For us to eat.
And so that has directly affected their flavor. And so I would actually imagine if we went back to before we started messing with what chicken is, there's a good chance it may actually taste more similar to other fowl. Because these other fowl have not had this artificial selection.
Yeah.
And so I think, and that's also another thing, is that, a lot of chicken was artificially selected for in Europe.
Yeah.
And especially towards the northwestern areas like England, France, Germany, which tend to have, compared to a lot of the rest of the world, much more blander in some ways cuisine. And so there's a chance that they actually selected for less minerally flavors.
Now
that is, I will put out there, pure speculation.
Sure.
Especially considering that this is also the group that would have domesticated and, well, not domesticated, but definitely popularized beef, which, they may have been looking at as, we have beef, we can hunt deer, we can hunt duck. We want something that's maybe different in flavor from these.
Rip the auroch.
And that is something that is easy to maintain. So why not this nearly flightless bird?
Well, as we all know, they did selectively breed apples for looking nice instead of tasting good. So
yeah. Rip the red delicious apple.
The red delicious apple.
Yep.
One of the things that I think is most interesting about this is just the fact that, in a lot of ways, it's hard to pin down what a chicken actually tastes like because, like I said earlier, we don't just eat. I mean, some people do. And I mean, I've had it before. It's fine. But like a lot of people do a lot of seasoning to their chickens because it is sort of just like a bland meat.
Yes.
And so like it's also very possible that people don't know when they say like, oh, it tastes like chicken. Maybe they don't think necessarily it tastes like chicken. Maybe they're thinking it tastes like garlic salt or something like that.
Good. This tastes like that chicken dish I had.
Yeah. This tastes like buffalo chicken dip.
Worse than blandness, though, because we keep talking. I just said it was boring. We keep talking about blandness. Worse than the blandness, though, is chicken meat is really easy to dry.
Oh, yeah.
That I would rather just like moist chicken is fine.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of, I mean, well, I've only got a sample size of 2. I was going to say turkey is also a bird that I feel like is easy to dry. So maybe it's a thing that is common amongst like the fowl type birds.
That is true.
Yeah.
I can't see anyone sticking a whole ostrich in the oven. So I don't know if we can test that one, but.
Yeah. I will also put out there was at one time a reported belief that apparently human flesh tasted of chicken.
Huh.
However, that actually was then later, disproven when in an interview with a cannibal in Germany by the name of Armin Meiwes. Forgive me if I'm saying that last name wrong. It is Meiwes. He was having an interview from his prison cell, and he explained that apparently human flesh tastes like pork, a little bit more bitter and stronger of flavor.
I've read that, and it makes sense because of how compatible with humans the anatomy of pigs are.
I have always heard pork is the one that humans are generally compared to. I've never eaten a person, so I can't say.
Same.
I've given myself an electrical burn, and I do smell like burning like pork chops. So.
Oh, Jim. Never change.
There's one last thing I wanted to say on this topic, and that is just because it made me laugh. In an article on The Atlantic called My First Helping of Canada Goose, Canada Goose was described as the roast beef of the sky. That's it. I just thought that was a funny thing to say.
I like that. And I say that having not tried it, but I could believe it.
I don't know if I'd want to eat a Canada Goose.
I would certainly try it.
I'd try it.
I mean, I wouldn't not try it, but I just, they are mean and angry birds, and I don't know if I want anything to do with them. But I guess if they're dead and I'm eating them, then I have won. So
exactly.
That's the main. I mean, I'm not a hunter, and I don't know that I would have the capacity to go out and kill an animal.
You could throw a frisbee at a goose and it would die.
Yeah, I mean, I'd feel bad about it though. I don't know. So yeah, so if you have, that's why it took me this long to try venison, is I don't hunt. You can't really just go buy it. I'm sure you can, but I don't know. Hey, Jim, did you know that smoking cigarettes can be hazardous to your health?
I did.
Did you know that cigarette manufacturers knew that smoking caused health issues such as cancer, addiction, and even birth defects since the 1960s, but denied it anyway?
I did. That's true. Where are you going with this?
This is today's conspiracy theory of the week.
I'm confused.
In 1971, the president of Philip Morris denied that cigarettes had any health risks for pregnant women, despite a 1964 report by the Surgeon General asserting exactly the opposite.
Yeah, so he was wrong.
And in 1997, the president of Philip Morris was quoted as saying, if cigarettes are behaviorally addictive or habit-forming, they are much more like gummy bears. And I eat gummy bears, and I don't like it when I don't eat gummy bears, but I'm certainly not addicted to them.
He was clearly wrong.
In 1987, Philip Morris released a series of advertisements that pictured smokers talking to the reader with statements like, "Please don't tell me my cigarette smoke is harmful to you. There's just no convincing proof that it is."
Now hold on, there were extensive studies done in the 1950s about the link between smoking and lung cancer.
Even in 1954, tobacco companies released a statement to smokers stating, "We believe the products we make are not injurious to health."
Why would the tobacco companies say that? Surely with the money tobacco industries bring in, they could have dedicated a significant budget towards this research.
And yet, most of the reports that made it to the public were smaller independent research teams.
Could it be that the tobacco industry lied to discredit these independent studies? Why would they do that? What could they possibly have to gain?
Aha, you see?
Are you telling me that the conspiracy theory of the week was actually correct?
In 2006, the American Cancer Society and other plaintiffs won a major court case against Big Tobacco. The judge found tobacco companies guilty of lying to the American public about the deadly effects of cigarettes and secondhand smoke.
Tobacco companies were required to run an extensive television and newspaper advertising campaign at their own expense, admitting the truth about their products. It goes to show a corporation as financially powerful as the tobacco industry can have a huge command of what information gets into the media.
I think there is an interesting distinction to be made between the word conspiracy and the phrase conspiracy theory. I think a lot of times people nowadays hear the word conspiracy and think to discredit it immediately because of that.
The tobacco industry in this situation actually had a lot to gain from perpetuating the lie, so it was conceivable that there might be a conspiracy to hold on to that financial empire. A lot of times when looking at conspiracy theories, a good question to ask is, who stands to gain?
That is a very good question to ask.
Plus, a lot of people who were actually addicted to nicotine and didn't want to believe it would hurt them are out there.
That too.
And smoking is bad.
That too.
So that was a conspiracy that happened. So what's the next question?
Well, question 2 this week. Why do Klingons have head ridges? And what do Twi'lek head tentacles do? Which fictional alien designs have practical anatomy, and which ones just look neat? I think this is a fun question.
I like this question.
I do too. This isn't directly pertinent to the question, but I thought it was something that it was worth bringing up, is that in the Star Trek universe, the humanoid species actually all do share a common ancestor. It was I can't remember the exact specifics, but there was like a proto-civilization that seeded basically bipedal humanoid creatures on many, many planets throughout the entire galaxy.
I didn't know that.
Which is a great way to explain why they all look like people.
Wasn't that the premise to that awful alien franchise movie? Yeah.
Yeah, that too. So that isn't directly tied into the question, but it is something that I think is worth mentioning since Klingons are in there, and then you could also extend that to talk about like the Bajorans and the Kardashians.
Sure.
You know, the one that has the weird nose that's, I think, in Deep Space Nine.
Wait, go back. Just, did you say Kardashian?
Did you say Kardashian?
I said Cardassian.
Oh.
I might have said Kardashian, actually, but it's basically the same thing.
This was just my ignorance of sci-fi. I was like, is there an alien race called
it is the Cardassian, not Kardashian. Okay. So I think I might have misspoke because I'll go back and listen to the recording and we'll find out if I made a mistake.
Fair.
I would have believed you if that was actually what you said it was called, but I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
There was a little internet meme that I always thought was very funny where it was keeping up with the Cardassians, and it was just the Star Trek villains like in a really fancy room or something like that. I don't know.
Okay. Yet another internet thing I'm just out of the loop on.
But as far as like the Klingons and a lot of the ones from Star Trek, I don't know if they ever really explain in canon why these things actually, no, that's not true.
Okay.
In Star Trek with the Klingons, I don't know how canon this is because it's very stupid.
It's Star Trek. What I mean.
So in the original series, the Klingons didn't have the head ridges because A, they hadn't thought to do it, and B, they didn't have a budget.
Okay.
And so when they had a budget, they make up the Klingons, gave them the headridge thing that they have. And in universe, no one really comments on it because that's like, oh, that's just how they were supposed to be the whole time. In the expanded media, I can't remember a lot of the details to this, but they explained it that some kind of weird virus or some kind of weird disease ravaged the Klingon Empire and it changed their physiology. It's one of those things that is designed to explain something away that happens on screen, but no one on screen cares that it happened. It was just because the budget got better. So I remember it being very hokey when I read it. I didn't read the actual like source material. I just like read it on some wiki entry of some sort. But
Okay.
This is based on nothing scholarly at all. But the first thing I thought of with Klingons, I am less familiar with the original series, so I actually didn't know that they didn't have head ridges back then. Most of what I know about Star Trek is TNG. So there's that. But and Worf, go Worf. But I always kind of thought it was similar to like if you look at Neanderthal skull shapes, how they're like mostly a humanoid species, but like they're clearly a little different. Like, because like Klingons are usually depicted as being kind of bigger and more physical, from in my experience, and Star Trek fans are gonna attack me and be like, you don't know anything about Klingons, and you're correct. But that was just an interesting like comparison I made in my head. So like, feel free to shoot that down.
No, I think that's fair. But then again, I'm also coming at this more from I know Star Wars lore way better than I know Star Trek.
Okay.
I feel that that's largely true of me as well.
So tell us about the Twi'leks, guys.
It's their brain.
Is it?
No, seriously. So
I don't think I like that.
So in both Twi'lek and in Togruta, Togruta, for the record, for those who might not know the race name, Ahsoka is a Togruta.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I just thought she was a Twi'lek. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, all the internet. I'm just sorry, this whole episode.
We've declared war on the internet again.
Yeah.
That's
all right.
I just don't know Star Wars. I'm sorry.
But actually for Twi'leks and Togruta, their head tails were sensory organs, and also, at least in Twi'lek, now admittedly I will explain, this is in Legends, not necessarily in canon anymore. They haven't really addressed it in canon.
Yeah, none of it's real. It's fine.
Yeah. It did actually contain part of their brain.
Okay.
And so a Twi'lek, if they had their Leku severed, they could continue to live without it.
Okay.
However,
be like a lobotomy then.
Yes, they would lose some amount of functionality.
Weird.
But what's also interesting is that it also has basic motor functions. And it's actually known that for both Twi'lek and Togruta, you could actually do a very primitive, very basic form of almost sign language by manipulating your Leku and head tails.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, which I likely am, but it seems weird to me that every picture I've ever seen of a character who is a Twi'lek or this other thing I just learned existed, that they usually have the head tentacles exposed.
Yes.
And it seems like, because I'm thinking of like Mojo Jojo, where his brain is exposed, but he has like a protective dome over it. Like, it seems like you would want to armor your head, like in the same way that we humans armor our heads because our brain is very important.
Sure. And I would generally agree with you. However, At least according to some sources. The Leku, the portion of the brain contained within the Leku were generally repressed subconscious memories, for example. Or again, you could have some basic motor functions in there. So if you lost all of one of your Leku, let's say, you may have some issues.
Okay.
But you could have it like partially severed and probably be fine.
That's interesting. I didn't know there was a canonical answer to that, but that makes sense.
I am in no way shocked that there's a canonical answer to that.
Okay, so let me give you this point, because I also am not really shocked that there is a canonical answer, but I looked at the Geiger drawings of the xenomorph in Alien, and it's pretty well known that Geiger didn't think of, maybe it's a Giger. I think it's Giger.
Geiger count.
I don't care about Twi'lek or Twi'lek, but like I gotta get Giger right. But the Giger depictions of aliens, it's pretty well known that he just designed it to look cool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is a little bit more to it. He very much designed them, from what I've researched, to be phallic.
Well, yeah,
I have heard that. Yeah.
That's entirely aesthetics, which is my point, though.
Yeah.
It's intended to make you uncomfortable because of it is invading the human body. It's
yes.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't put thought into, so that goes as far as the little mouth coming out, and the fact that it can, how the face hugger is designed. But he didn't really put a lot of thought into the length of the head. What does it do for the species? It's just, it's supposed to look phallic, and it does. Good job. And then there's like spikes on the back, which just more things protruding off of it. They look cool. They look cooler. They look scary, or they make you uncomfortable. But it was years later that people went back and said, okay, let's actually figure out how does the anatomy of this thing work. And it reminds me of, this was actually an episode of this show that Joe was on when we were talking about UFOs. You start with the premise of what something looks like, and then you go and retrofit it to figure out how it works.
Right.
Yep. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that we've mentioned, like we talked about the Klingons and the Twi'leks, and both of them, they've had their anatomies explained by the expanded media. And not that that's a bad thing at all. I just think it's interesting that like they were designed to be interesting looking on screen, and then people who are deeply passionate about the material, passionate enough to write novels or whatever about them, they went back and they kind of fit these pieces in to connect all of this together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then let's be honest, kind of along the same lines as like the xenomorphs. Let's be honest, that is what happened with, the Twi'leks and the Togruta. Is this was, when Twi'lek first shows up, I believe we for the first time see one, if I recall correctly, in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, Bib Fortuna and I forget the name of the dancer.
Yes. Well, let's face it, that was just George Lucas going, I have this really cool, alien race in mind.
Yeah, headtails.
He probably did not have the idea of, oh, that's their brain.
Right, yeah.
Or part of their brain in mind. And so that is something that the expanded universe kind of took and retrofitted to make it mean something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In a similar vein, I feel like Jabba the Hutt is a really great example of something that is aesthetically designed to be a certain thing. He is a grotesque, large slug that is a crime lord, and that makes sense. As soon as you start thinking about a society of Hutts, or even just the idea that a sentient race of these things could have evolved without just being eaten by predators, because they are very slow. It's just kind of like you could pick it apart really, really quickly. However, I don't want to, because I love Jabba the Hutt. He's great.
Well, and that's totally fine. That if you're retrofitting these creatures to make them look, or to make their things make sense, and it's like, well, that could be done better. Who cares? Then we're in rule of cool. Can I ask a clarifying question real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Is the name of Jabba the Hutt's species a hut?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't like that at all. Because that's just like, well, Jabba, which Jabba? You know, the one that's a hut.
I mean, as far as I know, there are very few huts on Tatooine, so...
Okay.
I think if you went to, like, his home planet and said, like, I'm looking for Jabba the Hutt, and they'd all be like, all of us.
Yeah.
Jabba could be like the John of their world.
Yep. But yeah, Hutt is a race. So literally by calling himself Jabba the Hutt, he's literally saying that, you know, I am supposed to be like this important one here on this other world, even though it then later turned out that there were other Hutts on Tatooine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's the man, though.
Finn the human.
Yeah.
Finn the human.
Finn the human, exactly. But yeah, they originated... This is just something I happen to know. They originated from the planet Varl, though they later took over another world and named it Nalhutta, and they spoke Huttese.
That's like saying we are the humans from planet Human and we speak human.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to rant about space operas. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
This is like a lot of the expanded media tries to fill in gaps, and sometimes it does a good job, and sometimes it could do a little bit better.
It could do better, yeah.
Yeah. But you know, we talk about with the Xenomorph and with Twi'leks and about this idea of taking a design and then retrofitting detail into it. Yeah. But then you can jump to something like Mass Effect, for example, which is
I was gonna say Mass
built
Effect,
from the ground up with this immense lore in mind. And so, for example, I always like to look at, for interesting design, I look to the Krogan. Now, for those who are unaware, the Krogan are these generally massive, like they're bipedal, kind of reptilian,
they're
with these large
friends.
Yeah. And they have these giant humps on their back. And it is actually written into the lore that these humps are exactly like that of a camel. They are meant to maintain water and nutrients so that they can go on extended hunts. And the larger your hump...
like a wasteland planet.
Exactly. And so the larger your hump, the more prestigious it is, because that means you can go on these longer and more rigorous hunts without needing to come back to the settlement to refuel.
I just want to point out to the listeners, I do know Mass Effect.
Yeah, Mass Effect, I feel like they did put a pretty good amount of thought into a lot of the designs that they had. I never actually played Mass Effect. I watched my wife play through all of them, but I really liked the aesthetic of a lot of them. Some of them, I mean, you know, it can be silly because they just are designed to look cool, but I feel like there was a lot of lore in that game that made it feel more justifiable.
A lot of the influence, there was a lot of, what's his name? Frank Herbert, I think, influence in that. The guy who wrote Dune. Is that Frank Herbert?
I believe. Hold on.
There's a lot of influence from like Dune, and if you've ever attempted to read the Dune books, there's a lot of information about the history of all these different cultures and stuff in that.
And yes, he is the writer for Dune.
Ah, nice, I got it. I just told the listeners I am familiar with Mass Effect, and now I have to walk that back a little bit and say, yeah, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to all the meta text in that game, but I would argue that more of those alien races they designed thinking about the practical use of their anatomy. Because it just seems like that kind of game.
Yeah. There's certainly one I can think of that was solely from the ground up for aesthetics, and that's the Asari.
Well, yeah, because
Now, they do explain the ridges. I will say, in the lore, for those who don't know, the Asari are these blue humanoids that instead of having hair, they have, like on the top of their head, they have these like ridges kind of in their head.
like nautilus tentacles.
Yeah, that kind of tie at the back a little bit. And it actually turns out that those are rigid cartilage.
Huh.
They are cartilage-based scalp crests that grow into its shape. So, yeah. And that's like, I hate to say that's like their only unique factor. It's not, but the rest of their unique factors come more from their race and culture than from their physiology.
In my opinion, that does not represent anyone else's opinion. They are the laziest designer in that game.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
They were 100% designed, at least in my opinion, to be the easily attractive, like, you know, if you're going to, because a big part of Mass Effect is there's a romance element. They're meant to be the most easily romanceable non-human race.
They're the Captain Kirk bait.
Exactly. They are human adjacent.
Another world that I looked a lot at was Doctor Who, because I know a lot about Doctor Who. And one of the neat things about Doctor Who, and this is true of a lot of science fiction, to be fair, but a lot of Doctor Who, there are races that have been genetically designed on purpose. So they don't have to have, like, practical anatomy. They were designed to do a thing. So, like, the Daleks, for instance, are little squid guys, and they were designed to be little squid guys. They don't have any kind of practical anatomy because they're little squid guys.
Oh,
So their little battle tanks probably could have been a little bit more elegantly designed, but then again, they do their job well. They look innocent and they don't look menacing because they look like big salt shakers, and then they kill you and you're dead, and that's just great. I love it.
But of course, nobody expects to be killed by a plunger and a whisk.
Exactly.
That's really interesting to me because we've been talking about like what evolutionary benefit does the body shape of these fictional alien races have? And if you look at, you could ask the same question about what evolutionary benefit does an English bulldog's smashed face have, and like, I mean, there's more to it than this because their jaw and bite strength is really powerful, but like realistically it doesn't really benefit them evolutionarily speaking because we bred that.
Yep.
Weird.
Yeah, any sort of brachiocephalic.
Oh yeah.
There's a $5 word there.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, any sort of brachiocephalic kind of evolution was selected for.
Yeah.
Because if you allowed that to exist in nature, most likely it would get selected against.
Yeah.
That's I didn't know that about the Daleks.
Oh yeah. One of the ones in Doctor Who that I think is ridiculous is the Ood. I love the Ood. They natural regular Ood that have not been tampered with by humans. Their brains are external. They hold them in their hands. It's wildly impractical. How do you even?
Those are the Mind Flayer ones.
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've seen those.
Had to look at a picture of a Mind Flayer.
They look like the Ood.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just literally carry their brain in usually their left hand, and it's tethered to them with
a brain stem of some sort.
A brain stem.
Yeah.
And then humans kind of came along and said, that's not smart, and gave them artificial ones that are just technological brains instead.
But it's also designed to enslave the Ood, so
Right.
Maybe not the best, but I do love the design of the Ood. I like them a lot, except for the brain thing. That's silly.
Yeah.
Doctor Who is just filled with these kinds of things. I'll tell you which one has really practical anatomy is Weeping Angels.
I actually disagree.
Oh, really?
Whoa.
I don't think it's practical at all. Because what is practical about a hunter who cannot move while it is being observed at all?
But they can move so fast.
I mean, yeah, when they aren't being observed, yes, I agree. Perfectly practical because they literally can just teleport.
That's true.
Basically.
It's interesting that you specify hunter, because that would be a good ability if they had to like hide from things.
Except I would argue, wouldn't you rather just be fast moving, period? Because even if you are being observed, if you are fast enough, which, let's face it, the Weeping Angels are, then who cares if they're being observed? Because they should be able to just speed rush you anyway.
What I want to know is what evolutionary pressures caused this to happen.
The need to be in a horror movie.
Well, because then there's some evidence that they weren't evolutionarily selected for.
Oh.
That it was messing from the Time Lords.
Oh, of course it was them.
Yeah, well, they do that a lot.
Because there's some evidence that, one, that the Weeping Angels are Time Lords that were sent back in time for punishment reasons. I don't recall the exact reasons and like how it happens. And then there's some evidence that they were an enemy that the Time Lords were fighting. So it's one of those two, supposedly.
Didn't it turn out that they were able to move when being observed in like a later... I don't remember.
I don't recall all... The big thing I remember is that not the Eiffel Tower. That's the wrong thing. Lady Liberty is a giant weeping angel. And the reason it has not moved is because, let's face it, someone is always looking at that.
So the one more thing that I wanted to add to this question was, since we were talking about the retrofitting of things, I wanted to plug, and I'll put in the show notes, a link to a YouTube playlist by an artist that has been, I guess, commissioned by Marvel Comics to draw an anatomy book of a bunch of Marvel characters. And so he has drawn a bunch of like superheroes, like Wolverine and Venom are two that I know that I watched, where he imagines how their bodies are built, and he kind of describes his thinking while creating those things, and does like a video of him drawing the art pieces too, and they look like kind of anatomy textbooks but with superheroes in them, and so I thought it was really neat.
That's fair.
All right, listeners, there's a ton more to say. We just ran out of time, so let us know this week which fictional alien designs were bred for their taste. Jim, do we have any listener mail this week?
We do, and as always, if you want to send us listener mail, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com. You can comment on our blog, you can like us on Facebook, you can tweet at vaguelysci, and this email comes to us from Carp Diem, and is in regards to episode 131, Calzone Earth, and Carp Diem writes, one idea about flat Earth is that everything is separated by density. This is largely true, but there are plenty of things that have not done this. The main reason for this in the real world is because the denser materials sink to the core of the Earth.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no. Totally, it's a flat Earth. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, they explain what we call gravity by saying things are different densities, which... if you really analyze their argument, they're just describing gravity, but not using the word gravity a lot of times.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that they acknowledge that other planets are spherical, just ours is different.
Well, most of them don't.
Yeah. Most of them think that that's a hologram or something.
So space doesn't exist, and it's a firmament over... it's a dome, and there are no other planets. Those are made up. I'm not going to rant too much about flat Earth. Space operas and flat Earth. I could go on. Let's not.
Space operas about flat Earth. So that would be weird.
I would give it a chance.
I'd watch that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the sort of like twist is, I guess, because there would have to be a twist.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean,
A twist in the
I'm
flat
willing to
earth,
give any
it's-
musical a try once. I just watched one last night about a teenager who comes back to life and murders nerdy, prude teenagers.
That reminds me, I want to play Trivia Murder Party again.
That is a fun game.
Well, thank you very much for that email, and if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, please email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and all the other great places that cool podcasts like to hang out, and subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
And also telling your friends that I'm sorry I don't know Star Wars.
That's okay.
You know it well enough, it's fine.
You know it exists. That's
I
plenty.
know vaguely what it is. It's fine.
And it's perfect because it's vaguely scientific.
Yeah.
Woo.
Can you tell Han and Luke apart?
If I can tell Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill apart.
All right, you're good.
Perfect.
Our vaguely musical intro was composed by Anthony Pizzelli, and don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. It's a great place to go for all your holiday shopping because they got a lot of different kind of stuff.
Yeah. Check out the merch. So thank you to Joe for being our guest this week.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's always fun.
This was a fun time. For Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Joe.
See you next time. Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Toodaloo.
Bye.
I think that the bottom line is that we've had 5 and change years of not having all that many technical difficulties, and they all just happened in one night.
They're all compounding now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it a full moon? Is that the issue?
it could be. It's certainly at least a waxing gibbous.
I was gonna say I don't know what today's moon cycle is.